at Uhuru Park. We will be speaking to Rita Tinina in a few minutes to tell us what's happening there. Apart from that, we'll also be having a conversation here in studio on the plight of workers, Kenyan workers, and at the same time following up what's happening with the ODM Nairobi primaries. There are quite a number of issues that some of the aspirants brought forward yesterday and today, and we'll be keen to hear what our Timothy Otieno has to say in an update which will be coming up in a few minutes. For now, though, I want us to cross over live to Uhuru Park and speak to Rita Tinina. Rita, thank you very much for joining us on News Center. So, first of all, the workers want an increase, a 22% increase, in their salaries. Is this going to be addressed? Do we have any hint of that? All right, I understand we don't have Rita Tinina yet, but we'll be talking to her in a few minutes. But like I mentioned, that Kenyan workers, of course, will be keenly following up on the events from Uhuru Park this morning, where President Uhuru Kenyatta is expected to attend this year's Labor Day celebrations. Now, earlier this month, the president said he will impress upon the private sector to increase workers' salaries during this year's Labor Day. It is somewhat tradition that on May 1st, the president announces token increases in the minimum wages. And the Court Secretary General Francis Atwoli wants the government to ensure that the rising standards of living are actually addressed. Now, this year's celebrations come amidst disquiet from a section of public sector workers and increased industrial unrest over poor remuneration. All right, so we'll be speaking to Rita Tinina shortly, and we'll be also crossing over there live once that event begins officially. All right, so like I mentioned, we'll be having a studio conversation. Let's just start it right now. And joining me right now is Lillian Dinda from Oxfam Women's Program. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Betty.
All right, so what is the expectation today? Like I was asking our reporter there are requests that the president should increase the minimum wage to 22%. Is that one of the things that you're also looking out for today?
Thank you, Betty, for having us, and thank you for starting this conversation. I'm glad that there's already a discussion about the workers' wages, and specifically the most vulnerable of the workers, the domestic workers, who include our house helps, the watchmen, the cleaners, the gardeners, the lower cadre of workers who are mainly doing invisible work, if I could say. But beyond the salary, we would like to see a conversation around the decent working environment that they all should have, like any other employee. So I'm hoping the conversation today will go beyond the salary, but to discuss a decent working environment for the workers also.
All right, so when you talk about decent working environment, who does it cover when it comes to people who are employed in different sectors?
I think every worker deserves to work in an environment that is friendly to them and that helps them to be as most productive as they can be. Whether they are working at home, whether they are casual workers or monthly salaried workers, everyone deserves an environment that enables them to produce as much as they can. And let's face it, we all need every worker in our homes, in the country, and so we cannot have rights for me and you who work in the office and the informal sector workers where the domestic workers fall are ignored.
All right.
Yes.
Let's talk about domestic workers, because a few years back there was such a big conversation about how much they should earn, and everybody who has one, especially the domestic workers, it was impressed upon them that they should pay them, well, at least a minimum wage. Was it 10,000?
Yes.
Has that? How can you assess if that's happening?
The conversation around the domestic workers' wage has been on for a long time. Yeah. But every time I think about it, I look at it from a perspective of the family setup. Me and you who have left our children at home to go to the office, and every other person, from the president to the watchmen who serve us, also have domestic workers.
Yeah.
And therefore, the salary discussion is a discussion that we cannot run away from, because they also all live in this city where watching the rates of inflation going high. They're paying school fees like every one of us. And so the salary is a big concern. We have domestic workers earning as little as 4,000 shillings, and they live in Nairobi with families.
Wow.
Yet the minimum wage is set to be 10,954, which again, many of the Kenyan population cannot afford to pay because they equally earn low wages and salaries. So I think it's a discussion that we need to have as a country, both employees and employers, because this is where we are. We all need our lives to improve, both domestic workers and everyone else.
All right, and it's even interesting, the question even has widened, and is that 10,000 even enough with the rising cost of living? All right, so we'll be continuing with the discussion here, but I want us to now link up with Rita Tinina. Rita, thank you very much for joining us on News Center. So a few minutes ago, I saw you speaking to some of the people who've gone to attend this celebration at Uhuru Park. What are they saying, Rita?
Well, they was just talking about their expectations as well as their frustrations. One of them told me about, sort of broke down the 10,000 shillings minimum wage that workers get, saying that if you subtract rent, there is food, there is fare, there are the basic needs, you're left with nothing. There was another, a security guard, we'll be getting back to them shortly, who was saying they're concerned about their health. Their pay slips do not include things like the NHIF or the NSSF. And so they're saying these are the issues they expect to be addressed here today by the government. President Uhuru Kenyatta, I guess, gave the workers so much hope last month when he spoke, when he toured a garment factory in Babadogo, when he said that the workers need a pay increase. And so today they're expecting something will happen. It's been 2 years since the pay increase was implemented by the government. By then, 2015, it was increased by 12% only. And by yesterday, Kotu Secretary General, when he attended the traditional Sunday service at the St. Stephen's Catholic Church, Anglican Church rather, on Jogoo Road, saying that they were going to push for a 22% pay increase. So today we're expecting to hear some good news from the government. That is what the workers are expecting. They are arguing that the cost of living has gone high. It's being made worse by the high inflation rate. And so they're expecting the government to give them something that will sort of make their lives better, if at all. Right now, we are waiting for President Uhuru Kenyatta to arrive. Other dignitaries are already here. Workers, not many of them. Uhuru Park today is quite empty compared to past years, but maybe it's because of the weather. It's been raining this morning, and perhaps many other workers are still making their way here. But here at the podium, dignitaries, members of the diplomatic corps, several cabinet secretaries are here. Labour Cabinet Secretary Phyllis Kandie, the other cabinet secretaries, Professor Jacob Kaimenyi, Amina Mohamed, Rachel Omamo. There is also Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero, the Kotu Secretary General Francis Atwoli, and Uhuru Kenyatta, the president, is expected to preside over these celebrations here at Uhuru Park this year. Last year, he skipped the celebrations. This year, many are seeing this as an opportunity perhaps for him in terms of campaigning for his re-election, and the good news that perhaps he will give the workers today. That is why the workers are banking on some good news from the president, knowing that he has to reach out to them as he seeks some re-election. They know he has to give them something perhaps in return. Betty.
All right, going back to the conversation about the wages and that increase that they're asking for, is it really likely that is going to happen, considering that, the president himself has been talking about, a ballooning wage bill?
But it is the president who promised something. He said this year the workers should get something. He was going to prevail upon employers in the private sector to do something and give the workers a pay increase. And that is when he was in the garment factory, as I mentioned. And by then he also told them that if they were to get a pay increase, they would also have to work for what they were being paid. Betty.
All right, thank you very much, Rita Tinina.
Do we know how far the event is from starting?
Well, no indications yet, but as I mentioned, many of the dignitaries are already seated. These celebrations, the program here is it starts with many, or rather companies and employers showcasing their products or as well as their tools of trade before the speeches. It is usually not very many speakers. Kotu Secretary General Francis Atwoli, the Labour Cabinet Secretary, and then now the President, who will be here today, will be expected to make his address. Betty.
All right, thank you very much, Rita Tinina, for that. We'll be going back there to continue speaking to her once that event begins. We understand that the President will be arriving at Uhuru Park in about 40 minutes. That's at 11 a.m. All right, let's continue with our conversation here in studio. And Lillian, we were talking about this increase in salaries, but you're saying that it's not just about the salaries. There's so much more. There's the environment. But let me bring in a bit of politics before we continue the conversation. It's an election year, and like Rita said, the president will want to warm up, to the workers. Do you think that this is a good thing? At least, even if it's politics, they will be able to get something from it as he tries to endear himself to them.
Thank you, Betty. I think it's a good conversation that we are having and talking about the incomes that people earn, because you can see from reports all over how the living standards have gone high. And this is a huge population. We are talking about the informal economy in this country that employs up to 83% of the population. Wow. If you have 83% of the population earning less than 10,000 shillings. How are their living conditions? How would they be able to take their children to school? How will they afford food? These are the questions that this population are struggling with. And so I would be very happy to see an increase in the minimum wage. But beyond the increase in minimum wage, to ensure that these workers enjoy a safe working environment and a friendly environment where they can deliver their mandate. Kenya is a signatory to respecting employees' rights. In the ILO Convention 189, which talks about decent work, Kenya supported the adoption of that convention. And this convention talks about more than the wage to more of the decent work. How many hours these workers putting in a day? Does this person have time to rest, for example? Does the person have time to associate with their peers and their family? Can they get a sick off if they are unwell, or a sick off comes with getting fired? Those are some of the other conversations that we need to have.
All right, and there's evidently a lot that needs to be done, but can you say that we've made any strides in this respect so far as a country?
Oh yes, I think the fact that Kenya agreed to the adoption of the Convention 189 is a great step towards the right direction, because that means we agree to the conditions of decent work, and we want our country and the employees to enjoy this. What we lack is the enforcement of that, or the domestication of the convention to look into how we are going to implement it. For example, the domestic workers work in our houses, at our homes. Yes. How can that be enforced? That will not be enforced by the government. That will have to be the employer making a decision that I will create a good environment for my domestic worker. Think about it. It's the domestic worker who spends most of the time with your children. And so if you harass this person, and we have many of them reporting physical abuse, sexual harassment, and all manner of mistreatment. If you harass them, it's most likely going to affect your children also. And so especially us employers, it's a high time we thought about these people who look after our children. But are we aware of that?
It's so interesting that you're saying it's not just about the government. The government can do so much, but it also comes down to us as employers. Are we aware? Are Kenyan employers aware about these issues that you're talking about?
I think we are at the right space
now. Or are domestic workers mistreated most of the time?
The statistics of mistreatments are quite high. It's shocking. And when you listen to the stories, because we work with these women throughout this city and in the country. When you listen to the stories of someone whose utensils are kept outside,
Yeah.
they do not share utensils with the family.
They're kept outside the house.
Yes, the family they cook for does not allow them to share utensils. And this is someone you entrust to cook your food. Yet
And you leave them with your children.
You leave them with your children. So the mistreatment, the harassment is quite high. And I think as employers, we have a responsibility to ensure that we give dignity to the people who take care of our homes. And beyond paying them fairly, we also respect them. I know many employers will say, oh, the domestic workers are difficult, they are not nice. But if you're trusting them enough to leave them at your home, there must be something. There must be something good about them. You can build that, you can nurture that to get the best out of them. And the government can also create an industry which people will respect and bring dignity back to the job.
All right. Ndinda, tell me, as an employer, what is it that I must do or I should do to ensure that you know, of course, the domestic workers are able to pay their children's fees, able to take care of themselves, and also provide that conducive environment for them? Maybe people actually do not know.
Thank you, Betty, for that question. And the fact that many people do not actually know how to treat employment of domestic workers, for example, is a real challenge. And domestic workers also need to have some terms of their employment.
Right.
When you're
like
hiring,
a contract.
yes, a contract is actually important.
But there's nobody to educate them about this.
Well, this education is there now because several stakeholders are already working at it, led by KUDHEA, the Union for Domestic Workers, Industrial Hotels and Educational Institutions Association. And they are leading that together with KOTU and bringing in the Ministry of Labor and the Federation of Employers, FKE, and other stakeholders from the civil society like ourselves, Oxfam, and other national NGOs and community-based organizations, and the women themselves who form the majority of the domestic workers. We're starting the conversation around how the rights of domestic workers can be secured, how they can have dignity at their workplace. And so this information is already available, and it's on websites. We can have the conversations, we can give contacts.
But it should be easier than that, because not many of them also have access to, say, the internet. So it's very hard for them to get this kind of information, which is valuable to them.
This is a good start point, generating the information first. Getting it out there is through even forums like what we are having now. We talk about it and we talk about where they can access this information. But beyond that, we want the conversation, especially with employers, to continue so that it's not the government enforcing, it is us enforcing dignity to the people who work at our homes.
And that's the dignity I wanted you to talk to us about, so we'll continue with that conversation in a few minutes. So for now, we'll take a break, and we're coming back shortly. Remember, we'll also be putting special focus on what's happening with the ODM primaries.